Danielle.
Hi, Mel. How are you?
Well, spring has sprung. There's daffodils everywhere. Absolutely beautiful. And it just feels like a totally different planet to live on when it's like this. It's beautiful.
Does. Yeah, we have these they're called Bradley pear trees and they kind of smell like fish, but they're so beautiful to look at. So you always know spring is well on its way when the Bradley pear trees begin to flower and they have these beautiful white flowers. And so we have a row of them that on our neighbor's house that go all the way down. And so as I look out my window here, I can start to see all the beautiful white blooms that are appearing, indicating that spring is upon us. So it's
Yeah,
been
so
really
in the
nice.
UK, yeah, we get the daffodils and then we get the blossoms on the trees. So we've
Yeah.
just started in this last week, you could literally see the buds blooming. It's been really nice.
It's such an exciting time of year when it reflects this way upon the earth, having, you know, walked through this year-long cycle, right? And entering upon the zodiac's new year now that you're now coming into everything that's been blossoming, everything that's been under the ground. And now it's just like, whoa, the beautiful colors are back. And, spring has the prettiest colors. It's when the flowers really start to bloom. You've got all your early bloomers coming out right now, but for the next couple of months, you're really going to start seeing the blooms in the trees, the flowers coming up out of the ground. And it's just going to be a completely different experience in this natural world for the next 6 to 9 months. And it's really exciting that we're at the precipice of it.
Yeah, and I love the brighter morning and waking up early and getting back into the rhythm of connecting with the stillness in the morning, but the brightness, and the same as when the sun starts to go down in the evening, because we've just started to see the days get longer.
Get a little longer. Yeah.
So it's certainly a turn, and I think sort of represents what we're going to talk about tonight in our tarot series. We're going to look at the Wheel of Fortune.
The Wheel of Fortune. Da, da, da. Yeah, it's sorry, I'm over here being Vanna White for a second. So we are on, this is card number 10 in the Major Arcana, and it's called the Wheel of Fortune. And when you look at this card, it looks like the wheel of an old ship, right? It's a big wheel and it's got all of it. And then it's got its little things all around it. And it's really just kind of in reminding you that the wheel is always turning and life is in a constant state of change. Because although you have fixed signs around this card, you still are working in different energies entirely, depending on where you're at inside of the wheel. And so the Wheel of Fortune is trying to understand our place in the bigger picture, which is why you'll hear throughout our conversations, us referring to the wheel and how being in the center of this wheel is the best place to be, because you're not riding the outside going up and down. You're not on that roller coaster anymore. And so when I'm referring to the wheel, I'm always referring to the Wheel of Fortune. And, life comes up and life goes down. The more centered inside of that experience you can be, you become the observer, and the observer is not affected in the same way that the person riding the outside of the wheel would be. And so if you've listened to any of our other podcasts, you'll hear that be us making that constantly. And that's the reason why. So the element of the Wheel of Fortune is fire. So we're thinking passion again, right? We're thinking the things that make our heart pitter patter, that build the something in your stomach, that makes your mind start to move forward in progressive thought patterns, correct? So you're also working with the ruling planet of Jupiter, which if you've listened to any of these before, Jupiter is an expansive planet. It's a planet of luck. It's a planet of anything that your heart desires. If you start working in that direction, could be possible, because Jupiter is backing it. And the Wheel of Fortune is the perfect card for the planet of Jupiter with this fire element, because it keeps you not only aware that time is ever changing, cycles are always going to come and go, but it gets you excited. Maybe if you're inside of the lower parts, when we're doing what we call shadow work, when you're working with the unconscious mind, when you're working through healing, the darker parts of healing, you can know that if the Wheel of Fortune makes its way into your tarot cards, that you're about to have an upswing. And then the same can be true of the Wheel of Fortune. If you're in a high moment and you receive that Wheel of Fortune, then you can know that you can continue to ride this vibration. But if you receive it in reverse, then you need to start maybe making some adjustments that this of how your detachment style looks, how you view and observe this world around you, or the inner world within you. And so the Wheel of Fortune really comes as a vibe check, if you will. Like, how's your vibe? How are you experiencing the world? How is the world experiencing you? As it is a reflective thing. And that's my opinion. That is not fact. This is my opinion, that the world is reflective. And so if what's going on within you is now reflecting on the outside of you, then the outside is coming back and reflecting on the inside of you. Excuse me, I have to sneeze.
Bless you in advance. The interesting thing about what you've just said, though, is that how we experience the world is based on our perception, isn't it? And because our brain, has filters, our perception will be either with perceiving it through different color lenses, and sometimes we'll perceive it as negative and sometimes as positive. And so even though the world reminds us that we're in a constant state of change and we have an ebb and flow of life, our perception of that is certainly going to decide whether or not of what our actual physiological experience of that will be.
Yeah. And how it's going to affect the psyche.
Yes.
And it's very important that, when the Wheel of Fortune comes forward, that you're aware that this is, obviously the world is going to continue its cycle. It's about how you handle this. That's going to be the key. And Mel and I, from personal experiences, inside of conscious states, and this is the awakened state. This is when we're aware of, what we're doing, why we're doing it, the 5W kind of thing, the who, what, when, where, why, and then the how. When you become awakened and you become conscious to your deliberate action, things still can go awry. Things will still bring chaos to your door. Things are still going to happen in this world. We do not have control of anything outside of ourselves, right? So when the Wheel of Fortune comes, you can still have this beautiful consciousness, and chaos can come to the door. But guess what? We're not answering it now. Instead, we observe it, acknowledge it. And I think, Mel, you said something to me today. It's just, maybe sometimes it's just the awareness of it, right? Just being aware of what it is and not allowing yourself to fall into it, to fall the victim to it, not become the persecutor of it, just allowing the outside forces to be while keeping your vibe in check really is a game changer. Yeah.
And I think I want to expand on that, because we're going through such turbulent times, and we have been for the last few years, but because of all the events that are playing out on a macro level, it's really, really important to emphasize why we need to get back into the center of that wheel. So if we've got things going on in our house, for example, so recently I've had a leak, if your front door doesn't close, you've got to get the lock changed straight away. You've got to turn the water off. If your car breaks down, you've got to get the man to fix it. Whatever the things are, you've got to deal with them. But even while you're dealing with them, your perception of them is also what matters, and your capacity to manage something that's come out that can feel like a curveball. Now, that's on a micro level, that's on a personal level. When there's things going on in your family and somebody's sick and you can't go into work, and you've got kind of things going on like that, your car breaks down, you're going to get the shopping, your bank doesn't deliver the money, or whatever the things are. On a family level, that's still tricky, but it's still about how you perceive it and how you manage that, what emotions you feel in that process. And as you said, on an awareness level, if you're aware and you can reflect on how you're feeling in each moment, you're able to, unless it is a true emergency where there's a fire and you've got to get out.
Yeah, but
then
that takes you to your baseline. That's our So we're talking just events here. Yeah, just normal, like not
normal day-to-day stuff that families deal with.
Yeah, exactly. Curveballs are normal, as much as we don't want to believe that, but they're very normal. So this is considered a normal. But when there's an emergency, that's all bets off. You have to respond in your appropriate way that you know how to. So it's ingrained in you.
It's still on a micro level. But what we've got at the moment is people are being bombarded with things on a macro level. We've got so much access to information now that it's coming at everybody from all these directions. And what it's going to do is jumble up any of those old histories, whole patterns, and we'll talk about the reverse of the wheel in a little while. It will jump up all those stuff, and that's why we keep going back to this. Think about the center of the wheel, because and obviously, I've said on many podcasts, and we've spoke about this, I practice meditation and yoga, and because I know now with practice, after a while, I started to experience the true benefits of how easy it is to come out of the perception and the mindset. Even if you slip into it, you can slip back into a state of peace.
You can.
Then it enables you to have better discernment, better clarity, and capacity to respond sometimes more appropriately. But we've got so much chaos, big stuff going on that is striking fear on a very deep level. It is knocking people over that have just about managed to sustain themselves for the last 2 years, are struggling. And so I just wanted to emphasize that in circumstances, pulling the wheel might just be, okay, the wheel's turning. I've had a bit of tougher challenge and now things are going to improve. But now what people are having to do, they're having to go, what's happening for me? What's happening with my family? What's happening with my friends and wider relationships? But also, what's all this big stuff that's happening? Because all of this big stuff is being fed to us all the time. And and it's regulating us on a constant basis.
Right. Again, that comes down to choice and decisions that we're making on what we are going to be conditioned inside of. I'm still aware of what's going on in this world without being drained from the things that I cannot control. If I cannot control it, I can still have empathy for it. But I know that I must detach from it, because even though this is affecting many people and my heart goes out to that, I still recognize the limitations on what it is that I can do. And just like any other form of big event, we can only take on what we can. We can only control what we can control. And we must be able to continue life. And this is throughout the history of the world. There's always a major event. There's always a war. There's always famine. There's always going to be a new form of a plague or a virus that comes forward. There's always going to be wildfires. There's always going to be tsunamis and earthquakes. There's always going to be people that are fighting their agenda so hard that it's causing harm to other people. This is the way of the world as it sits now. And that's part of being inside of this wills. We have to accept the world where it's at. And then we have to decide if I'm going to allow myself to fall victim to this worldly matters, or am I going to find peace regardless of the outside circumstances. And so when you're talking about that, that actually leads me into this planet, or this card is both masculine and feminine, which tells you that regardless if this is happening within your internal world or within the physical world, you are still to remain in the center of the wheel, because the life is up and down. This is consistent. Life has good and life has perceived bad, right? This is consistent. So what can I do in the face of this ever-changing consistency that keeps me safe, that keeps me grounded, that keeps me in a growth and healing pattern without allowing the distractions to come in, right? It comes down to, again, vibration. Where am I at within myself? Am I in a fearful state where every little thing, if I'm in a fearful state and this pin falls over, it might cause me to scream and lose my mind. That might be the final straw, that broke the camel's back. But if I remain in this state of a higher frequency, focused on what is I can and cannot control, which again is self and reactions, and I remain in the center of this will, then we can start to observe the world that's going on around us. Now we can start asking the deeper questions that are maybe triggering the fear, maybe triggering this response system, that are maybe saying, every time I turn on this channel to this one news station, I end up getting anxiety. So maybe I stop watching this specific news station and see if that changes. Maybe eventually I stop watching the news. Maybe eventually I start focusing on myself. Maybe eventually I start focusing on my path, because the world is going to have consistent chaos. That's what brings the balance. So if that consistent chaos is outside of you, or you're being able to do anything about outside of your control, remain in the center of the will, remain focused on yourself, remain focused on your healing. And that is how we're going to be able to use the Wheel of Fortune card to our advantage, is taking the lessons from that and acknowledging that the world is filled with all kinds of things. How we feel this inner world is going to be the thing that changes that for you.
Unless, of course, and there will be people who like drama, who like being angry, who like being anxious, who like having lots and lots of stories to talk about them that scare them a lot. But they don't necessarily realize that that's infectious and that affects a lot of the people around them. So that's the sort of energy that they're creating. And being in, as we learn in meditation and yoga, being in a constant state of fear or stress is really taxing for the body. So you might take all precautions to not get viruses, but if you're in constant state of fear and you're not eating well and you haven't got the right things going into your system, you're going to make yourself ill anyway. Yeah. Because we're seeing with the science coming out about the power of the mind, and how more and more is emerging about how we can actually start to heal our own bodies. Yeah. Well, we can do the opposite. We can create illness, and that's what disease is. It's
Yeah. And that's exactly right. We are getting more science coming in. Even the one that kind of got popularized was the 2 plants that they put in the schools, right? And one of the plants, they spoke only positive affirmations. They only told good, loving, filled with love. And on the other side, it was the other side of the coin. They only spoke fear into it. They only talked down to it. They only did these things, and you could literally see the difference. They were in the same spot pretty much. They were being watered the same. The only difference was how they were receiving vibration or energy. And so now if plants can literally be affected by that, the human mind can be affected by that. And so that's when I was saying earlier, is why it is down to a choice. It is our responsibility to take in and choose what we are going to fill our mind with, what we're going to fill our space with. What do you want your world to look like? And I don't mean the big world. I mean your world. What do you want your world to look like? Yeah. Because this, that's kind of an Easter egg for you guys, is we are here to create our own world while living inside of a world that was created for us. This is a beautiful little creator trick that I've learned along the way. And I was always so concerned about the wildfires or the children's labor, or something that was very scary for me was like the trafficking of human beings. These are massive things, that you really, but they're still going on, regardless if I'm stressed out, anxious about it, worried, doing rabbit hole after rabbit hole of research on, it still comes back to me and what I can control. And I can't control that. It's there.
Sometimes for people, that is a level of deflection, of keep going down those rabbit holes and keep, stirring up all the fear and anxiety about things. And there are people on particular paths that are meant to be crusaders, who are meant to go in and take action and run organizations that do this work. And if you're so propelled to do so, then do.
Yes.
But getting so worked up and anxious is not actually productive.
But that only proves my point. If that is your work,
Yeah.
and that is your calling, you remaining in the center of the will is even more important.
Yeah.
I have a calling too, just like you have a calling, and they're very similar callings. What happens when we allow ourselves to be outside of the will and we become less than observers? And we now have this energetic connection to the ones that are struggling and the ones that are fighting. It then reflects within us, and we start to struggle and we start having anxiety. You and I are called to help people. This is what we do. This is our namesake. We have a mission, but we have to remain detached and in the center of the will for this mission to be where it needs to be, for us to remain healed inside of it. So again, we can all have these specific pathways in front of us and know that is your calling, but the wheel of fortune comes forward and says, but you have to remain in the center of this will, or it's going to eat you. Your calling can be your gift or your curse. And it is our choice to decide which it is. You can know everything you need to know about whatever your calling is, but until you detach from the people that you're helping in whatever form, you're going to remain on the outside of the will.
Yeah. And that was very, very clear and very important when I was working directly as a therapist, whether I was working with, parents, teenagers, whoever. And I worked with a lot of people. And so the thing is, at the end of the day, you want to come home and to watch some mundane TV or comedy shows. You don't want to have lots of concerns about how and what's going on. I mean, where you need to take action, you do in any line of work. But the key aspect is, by me keep going back to that center and finding peace, meant I was much more able to tap into what I was experiencing when each person walked through that door before they told their story.
Yeah.
And by remaining in peace, that on some level is picked up by somebody, because at the end of the day, a lot of people seek peace, they seek stillness, they seek contentment, happiness, satisfaction, but get distracted and drawn into all of these elements because, well, it's teaching them sometimes, isn't it, about themselves or what patterns they've still got exposed. But if you only ever focus outside and you don't look inward, well, that can be a concern, because we do need to look inward, don't we?
Yeah, because you can be both compassionate and working in the trenches and still find detachment so that you can lead a joyous life.
Yeah. You have to, otherwise you do end up, we've talked about burnout, haven't we?
Yeah, burnout is a huge thing. And I can't tell you how many times I've been burned out because I allowed myself to step outside of the center and allowed myself to feel their emotions and not return back to my center. And it really caused a level of burnout that it wasn't even close to okay or healthy. Yeah. So it is important, no matter what's going on in your world, no matter what your calling is, that you have a sense of self enough to know that you come first, that your well-being has to be top priority, or you can't help another person. You just can't. No. And if you do, it's going to be loaded with all of your harm. And it might not do, it's like having dirty fuel, it's the same thing. It's like dirty fuel is not going to get you far. It'll get you far, but then you're going to have some repercussions because of it. The more healed and the more joyous and the more in the center you're staying and you're keeping your vibrations in check, the more you can do the work that you're meant to do. So the distractions are there. And I'm not saying that these distractions aren't just wrecking people, because they are. But if they're not wrecking you on a personal level, then to return to your center of the will. That is where you need to remain. You can still be helpful. You can still be compassionate. You can still be empathetic and not dive so deep into this roller coaster that you can't come out of it. And now you're the ones experiencing the same issues that these other people are.
Yeah. And if you want peace, you have to be peace. If you want joy, you have to be joy, don't you?
Yeah.
And if you want to help people, setting intentions sometimes can make a big difference. And that's why these things like, you know, global meditations for peace. And there's even been some research that was done around the time when Princess Diana died, and they looked at the global sort of frequency of the earth that was emitting at the time of grief, and then when all that was happening, and they certainly showed some differences of frequency at those time points, because it was such a big scale. So we've learned we can do the opposite. If there's war on terror, we can tap into this peaceful part, but spread that, and that will have a massive impact.
Yeah, it's called balance. You know, for every dark, there's a light. For every light, there's a dark, and the extremes are there as well. And the more you tap into the side of the things that you want to see for yourself and for others around you, and you become that thing, you're now creating more balance inside of this world. This is the way of the world. Do a little history, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. If you just do a little research on the history of the world, you will see that this is an ever evolving cycle. And maybe, you know, we haven't evolved as much as we'd like, but we're still kind of like the equivalent of toddlers when it comes to how long evolution has existed. So, you know, so again, I know it feels shameful and guilt-ridden when you first start to decide that you are not going to be affected by other people's harm and the terrorizing that's going on in this world, that, you know what, I cannot fall into that. And the Wheel of Fortune really does come forward to remind us that it is that important. God is not going to, if you worship God, God's not going to be mad at you. The universe isn't. In fact, this is exactly what they want. They need people like us to remain in the center of the wheel to help balance out those who are not. And the more we get people in the center of the wheel, the more balanced this world becomes. And we are looking to have a balance in this world. So it's nothing to be shameful about, nothing to feel guilty about. It is just part of the process. And as you grow and you heal, you're going to start to realize that you don't have to put all of that emotion into everything you're doing, because you can still do it with compassion, and you can still be empathetic without taking the all of that stuff on and then having to cleanse it later. You are not responsible for this, and that's okay. In fact, it's a blessing to know. Yeah, because it changes everything. It just changes everything in your life.
I think what it also reminds me of is what I used to say to parents when I was working with them, in particular when they had children that maybe had extra needs and they had to put in a lot more time and effort than, say, other families, you know, that whether that was with, you know, doctor's appointments, hospital trips, extra reading, or whatever the support was, that, you know, I used to say to them, if you're really tired and you can get rest, take rest when you can. If it's calm at the moment, see it as respite. So enjoy those moments, enjoy the 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day or a week, because you don't know when you're going to get another moment like that, especially when you have got children that are going through these tricky growth phases. You just don't know what, you know, whether you're going to get sleep for the next 3 nights.
When you're going to find it. You know, I have a friend that I love to watch her journey, because she's just gone so far and done so much. And in her world, everything's changing. The will is changing for everybody in different locations in her family. And she's got small children. So she's working full time. She's a spouse. She's got an active social life with friends. And so she already knows that she's in the healing modality. She already knows she's in growth. She's learning her lessons, she's doing. And so what she's done is to take her time back and to take herself back to that nature that she wants to be. She goes and runs a bath. And she does that as often as she can. And she stopped guilting herself for it. And she realized that when she stopped guilting herself for it, she didn't need as many hours in the bathtub, because now she's reaching the frequency that she's supposed to be in, so she can enjoy the space while she has it. So it doesn't take a monumental amount of time. She goes in saying, this is going to be peaceful. I am now peaceful. And then goes and takes this bath and becomes the peaceful person that she's meant to be, so that she can tackle yet another day. Because being a human is hard. First of all, being an adult human responsible for other humans at any capacity, that throws some real fun, like you just said, curveballs. And those curveballs come at you from every side. And you have to remember that I am responsible for me. I am responsible for me. You know, you have to remember that. And so I love that there's this person that is in the depths of parenthood, in the depths of a healing modality. And inside of that said, I need this space for me. And then goes and takes
so
it.
Important.
Oh man, it's awe-inspiring is what it is. In fact, she has inspired me on several occasions to go take the damn bath. Just go do it, Danielle. You will love every ounce of it. Don't talk yourself out of it again. Just go and take that bath. And so she's been very inspirational in a person who has, when I'm talking like a 3 or 4 year old, a small child. Okay. And then 2 others. So busy, you know, and so can square off just a little bit of space for themselves in that way. It's like, you've got this. Like, if she can do it, I know everybody else can do it. If she, who is in the middle of the hardest transition probably in her existence, is taking time for herself, then you know that this is possible.
Yeah, if you can stave away any of the, falling asleep in the afternoon because you're not getting enough rest, or, being really confused or stressed all the time, because you're not having those moments. And I certainly know when my children were growing up, the key message that I gave to them, there was 2 probably main messages, is when I came in from work, if they were here, before me, is let me just go and have a bath in half an hour, to defrag from work.
You need to be able to decompress in the way you need to decompress. Right. Yeah. Whereas I was the opposite. I had to get home and I just needed to keep going, because the moment I began to decompress, they were probably not bouncing back. So I would wait until I gave them their baths and they were settling. And then I would go and but I also put them to bed a little earlier. I was the 8:30, 8 o'clock mom. You go to bed early. I deserve some me space. And that's how I blocked my time out, was I gave myself a solid 2 hours of just me. Kids are asleep. I can do whatever I want right now. So,
definitely. And that's the key thing, isn't it, as well? So I knew having a routine every night, bedtime wise, they would go up, we'd whether read a story or whatever. And that was it within 20 minutes. And then, I'd have that me time. And it's so important, especially like you're saying, if, whoever it is, man or woman, you're working a job, you managing the house, you've got all these things going on. If a curveball comes along, then it unsettles everything. And you don't want to be half empty. You don't want to be sleepy. You don't want to be suffering from something. If you get enough rest and you allow the body, because that's the thing with a lot of healing modalities, as much as somebody has got some capacity to channel some healing from whatever they call it, source, Reiki, whichever, quantum healing, it's really when the person can relax fully and release resistance, is the body's then able to take on the healing. And then that's when the true work happens. If you're always in resistance and always walking upstream, then you're putting in so much extra effort. Right. Then it's really taxing. And
you're going to have really good mind muscles, but it's not going to, the glutes on your mind are going to be fat and nice. But you're right. The reality is the Wheel of Fortune really is a good reminder that you can run yourself in circles as much as you want. You can walk upstream as much as you want. The world has its own cycle. And there is nothing, you are not above the universal cycle, the world cycle, source cycle, whatever it is you want to call it, you're not above it. So some things we just have to accept. And, we were talking about parenting, but even as a single person, we have a tendency to feel like we need to fill our time. right?
Mm.
And say that you're in your 20s, or say that you're now an empty nester, and maybe in both cases you're single. We tend to then externalize in a different way. We're flooding the friends, we're flooding socialization, we're flooding the outsourcing, we're flooding work, we're doing all of this extra work. But what about the person that's doing that work? When are we taking the time to say, wait, how do I feel? Where's my vibration? How is my healing? When have I taken my time to see how I view the world? And so in any walk or any stage of life, it is important that we do these checks and balances. Last Sunday I was doing my weekly brunch for the fellowship, and a girl mentioned that, Danielle, you're so far ahead that I'm just trying to say, maybe you forgot some of the basics. And it wasn't that in that moment I was forgetting the basics. It was a beautiful reminder, though, that I have to go back to do my basic. What is it that I did? You said you can do Reiki, you can pray, you can do all of these. I'm a chakra worker, so I go into my chakras and I imagine my chakras. I imagine my energy centers. I see how I feel in my safety for my root. I see how I'm feeling in, my security and my womanhood through my sacral. Is there enough I am in my world through my solar? Am I compassionate, and am I giving grace the way I'm given grace in my heart? Am I speaking my truth? Am I seeing the world for what it truly is? And what is my connection now to the higher power that I personally believe in? And so that reminder, although it was in that moment, not exactly for that moment, it was this beautiful, like, I'm glad I was listening, because it reminded me. And then that very night I did some chakra work on myself, because we tend to forget the basics the further along in the journey we get, right? And so that reminder was, Danielle, maybe you need a little alignment for yourself. Maybe that will help clear some stagnant energies that might be residing within you. Some people can clear energy through reading a book. Some do it through coloring. Some do it through painting. I do a lot of it by speaking. It's a good way to clear energy. So there's not going to be a wrong way to find your peace or to find your center. Obviously there's unhealthy ways, but there's not a wrong way. You can choose whichever way and adjust accordingly as you grow and heal. And along this journey, you can adjust. We've talked about this just today, but we've talked about this in other podcasts. Value systems can change. Allow yourself to have the value system change. But when going back to this card, there are some key words that we do need to be aware of. Okay. So the key words are going to be karma, fate, and destiny. Okay. So it's funny because, there's a saying, and it's like, karma is only a bitch if you are. But if you take that down to another level, it makes sense, because we create our own karma. We create, either unconsciously or consciously, the karma that comes our way. Now, it might not be direct reflection. Sometimes there is a little justice that is needed. Things like this happen. Sometimes life just throws the curveball and you weren't asking for it. It was just part of the journey that you're walking. This is why it's important, again, to remain in the center of this wheel, right? So, but if we're thinking karma, what is it that I'm putting out? Am I projecting my fear and anger? Am I projecting love and compassion? Am I projecting into the world things that are progressive in leadership? Or am I projecting into the world all that is wrong? Karma's coming back to you.
Yeah.
So let's see how we're going to project that back out. Am I projecting out love and kindness? Because guess what? Karma returns in this beautiful, graceful way. Or am I spilling, hate and pointing the finger that you're the reason that everything's wrong in this world or in my world? And guess what? You're going to create more experiences like that. Karma's a smart lady, if we could call it a lady. I like to think of her as a woman with long nails and a tea glass, and she's just sipping her tea. That's how I envision karma. That's my favorite vision of karma, is just drinking her tea and telling you. So we got to pay attention to karma, and what we're putting out is what we're going to receive. It doesn't look exactly the same. That's not how karma works. Karma works in the feeling and the emotional side. So if you're putting out hate, you're going to be receiving a lot of hate. If you're putting out love, you're going to start receiving a lot of love. Even when your world is a mess and you are at the baseline of healing, the more you can focus on putting out good karma, the more good karma comes back your way. You know, it's the one thing in life that you probably want out of balance a little bit. You want it to lean towards the good, you know, you want it to lean towards good karma. So let's consistently put into that pot, as opposed to consistently putting into the negative karma, the karma that nobody needs anymore. We've done enough with hate, you know? So, fate, what is the difference between fate and destiny? You know, like, are you in a fated existence where you're standing outside of the will and you're just allowing the world to take you wherever it's headed, you know, because I can't tell you of a year where we weren't seeing something and said, this is the year where it all fails, is, you know, the world's coming to an end. You know, every decade we have the same conversation. The world's coming to an end. It's time. You know, did you see the 4 horsemen? Here we go, you know? So, you know, that would be more like a fated path. Whereas when you walk into that center of the will, you become a destined path. You are now looking at your destiny. And there isn't one person that goes on the healing journey and remains in the center of the will that doesn't get the destiny that they deserve, and even more than they know that they deserve. Because let me assure you, everybody deserves the world. We deserve everything in this world. There is abundance of everything. So let's just take it, right? So move yourself out of a negative karma, out of a fated path, put yourself into a good karmic round, give yourself the moment to say, maybe I have a destiny that doesn't look anything like this. What does that look like? Give the opportunity, start feeding the good. The wheel of fortune really will remind you of that.
The thing is a lot of people don't realize just how powerful they are and how much they are actually creating their world. And if they were able to really see, like you say, through the way that they think and feel, because one of the indicators that you've got some work to do on yourself is if you only ever seeing fault and criticizing other people, or, you know, you're pointing out somebody else, you know, being judgmental about somebody else's behavior. That's an indicator, isn't it? An invitation.
Because now
to say,
you're being judgmental of the person who's being judgmental. Yeah. It's a whole reflection, guys.
Yeah. So it's a moment of opportunity in sort of psychological terms to say, okay, so where is that hate within me? Where's that anger? Yeah. She's always angry. Well, where am I angry? She's always acting like that. Well, okay, so where am I acting like that? And that's a real clue to start, because you can consciously start to do some things different, but if you're not really clearing some of the more subconscious stuff, like what we talk about in the shadow, then the karma has a chance of just being fated then, doesn't it? Yeah. It's because you're not consciously really recognizing, using the world as a mirror. Now, I don't think everything mirrors us, but I think there's a lot of clues out there. If you want to work out where you are in your life, just have a look at your close relationships, or, you know, your work in life and how you feel about things. And then that indicates that. But we often, and we see this a lot in the spiritual community, don't we, where people will go on a search for something, a search for meaning, a search for purpose, go into another country to find peace, happiness, satisfaction, whatever that is. But it's often about searching it outside of yourself, searching towards a guru or a temple or wherever that is.
What is it?
And the moment you place that, focus onto something else or
something else. It's still externalizing.
So you're externalizing.
I think the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. Meaning you can't escape yourself. You can move to a community that's based in spiritual nature, where every morning everybody wakes up and does yoga and does something for the sun god, and then meditates and doesn't really do any of this normal, you know, but guess what? That community is still going to have its issues. Want to know why? Because you brought yourself there. And if you haven't healed, you're bringing all of your internal stuff right there. And here we go. There's the best way to reflect it. Now I'm in a new space and a new frame, a new everything. Yet everything is exactly the same when it comes to drama, depression, anxiety, friendships.
Yeah.
It's all the same. So you are always bringing yourself wherever you go. Again, the center of the will helps so much.
Well, if you enter any of those spaces and you start to do anything that's remotely like group work, for example, you know, you'll find at least several of your family members posing as some of the other people. I used to find this when we were doing counselling training, because, you know, it was 4 years of circle work. Yeah. And every week you turned up, and whatever issues you had with something that somebody said, what they did, how they were acting, whatever that was that triggered you, that annoyed you, whatever the feeling was, you could pretty much guarantee that it was a feeling or a pattern that was associated with somebody in your own family. So you literally had, you know, the same characteristics. Somebody always quiet, somebody always taking over the group, someone being dogmatic, someone being judgmental, someone being critical. Yeah. But you can turn it, once it turns around and people start to take responsibility for their own actions and behavior, and they're reflecting on themselves, because the beauty of going into the center of the wheel and centering yourself is you're then not going to spill out on everybody else, because that's the other aspect of karma, isn't it? If you come in and you're moody and you're starting to get angry and bitter and everything with everybody else, you've just created a whole 3 days of everyone being upset with you. Yeah. If you take yourself,
and now you have to dig yourself out of that hole.
Back out of that hole, yeah.
And it's just, that's a cycle, and that would be called karma. That is a fated cycle.
Exactly. That's what it really is in practice.
Yeah. You've got to actively practice. You have to be conscious. We have to use the series of the cards to their best advantage. So when we hit this Wheel of Fortune card, we are aware. We are aware of our magic. We are aware of our internal. We're aware of our external. We are aware of the strength that we have. All of these things are already here. So now the Wheel of Fortune approaches. And if you've been doing the work consciously, because when you work with the Major Arcana, it's a conscious effort, because now you're working with them. Now you're working with it consciously. You're like, oh, I can remain in the center of this wheel. I don't have to, if somebody spills all of this drama my way and they're so emotionally attached to it, I don't have to take that on. I don't even have to be mad at the person. I can just witness them. And now I'm observing who they are and how they act when they get upset or pushed against a wall or angered. This is information time. The more you're aware of yourself and you remain detached and in the center of who you are, the world displays itself wide open for you. You are reading things that you would have read on a person before. You are seeing things that you would have never seen in this person before. You are acknowledging things, because maybe this time I'm not going to respond the way I used to, because I'm aware I've been doing this Major Arcana trip. Now I'm kind of aware that I might be feeding into this. So I'm not going to feed into it this time. Let's see how the wheel turns. Make this fun. When you are in the middle of a healing and you're growing and you're learning these hard lessons, it doesn't feel fun, guys. It doesn't feel fun. And it's hard to remind yourself that it's fun. But if you just allow yourself, Mel says this all the time, become curious. Just become the curious person, become a scientist, become the curious child, whatever fits your narrative, become curious about it, and then allow it to display for you. And although some spaces can hurt, because it can, there's times when I've lost some really, what I found at the time to be an important friendships to me. I've lost them, but I only lost them because I got into the center of my own will and started observing them. And although it was hard, it hurt to cut that away, I would have still been circling this fated karmic cycle on repeat, because I was riding the ride with them instead of remaining centered and within myself. And then I can change how I respond. I can change how I react. I can change my thought patterns, and if I can control all of that, and I have all of this power and control for myself, now I can witness and observe another person. And now I can say, oh, that might be part of why I keep going through this cycle. Then it becomes a values thing. Then it becomes, and it's not that the other person's the bad person, because they're not. They're just unconscious to their behaviors, and they're just walking their fated path, letting the world decide what's next. But now you are in the center of the wheel, and you can observe, and you can say, I can see what happens next for them, and I don't want to be a part of that. Or I would like to try another round of this. It's just about being aware. It's just being conscious of what you're doing and why. And the center of that wheel is the best place, the best view.
Yeah. And the more you are in that center, and this is something I really experienced with the yoga and the meditation, because I was doing the practice every day. But even before I really got into yoga and I was doing just the meditation, whoever I was working with, or whether I stepped out the front door, I knew exactly how I felt. And one of the discoveries that was fascinating to me when I was looking at the gene keys and human design is quite a high proportion of everything I felt never ever belonged to me.
Right.
And the thing is when you get back to yourself and you're spending a lot of time meditating, mindfulness, whether that's staring at flowers, digging the garden, walking in nature, whatever it is, where you come back to yourself and you are not distracted by all the internal thoughts about all the other dramas and people. Once you can disconnect from that, because that alone can take some time to get into that space.
100%.
Yeah. And then you get back into that space and you start to realize, like what you're saying, you start to see things play out. Then you do, as you say, you get back, you go into your values. Okay, so what do I really want to feel? Who am I when I'm me, and who am I when I'm me with these other people or these situations? Okay, do I want to go into that cycle? Because we only have ourselves to blame if we keep getting caught into the situation.
Yeah, you can't be mad. And it's easy to be mad. This is part of how we're conditioned to externalize and to project and to, be the victim. And as a person who was a habitual victim, I can tell you this is normal, it's natural. This is how we've been conditioned.
Yeah.
It's that moment that you take that power back and you say, this person's always been this way. I can't be mad at this person for me liking that person when I was in that space as well. Typically, the reason why, and I'm sorry if this is wrong, Mel will correct me, but I have really noticed this trend that, they say after grief, like after like a loss in the family, death, that a lot of things people divorce, right? They because the people that you go on this healing journey with aren't usually the people that you stay around with, because at some point all these choices that you make, because there's always a choice, and you just whatever road, these roads can lead you guys very opposite sides of the space. And now you're not seeing things the same, and you're not in the same zone. So when you are going on a healing journey with somebody, and it might be conscious, it might be unconscious, the place that you found them, you might not remain in. And when you move forward and say they stay still, you can't be mad at them for staying still, because that's where you found them. And I know it feels like we should go and rescue, but then you remove yourself out of the center of the wheel. And where are you at in that? You're walking another fated cycle.
Well, then that's the cycle that a proportion of people are in, because if you're in victim, then someone's a rescuer and someone's a persecutor. That's the drama cycle that gets played out. And you can start to experience and detach and observe. And people, in particular in relationships, close, intimate relationships, people can be growing at different spurts and different stages. But if there's a stuckness, and the interesting aspect about the wheel that you said to me earlier was about the element of fire, because I certainly know when I can tend to get stuck, because Taurians can be dogmatic and fixed and get into particular cycles, positive or not, that can be detrimental. Because I've done fitness cycles that have been really healthy at one point, and then they become detrimental because I keep replaying them when I'm exhausted. But the thing is when you get stuck or you're caught in these things, is you remove yourself out, and you can do like the Chinese 5 elements yoga, which one of the focuses on fire. And one of the ways that I got unstuck, which is a kind of a wood energy, was to focus on practices that increase the fire in the belly, the system. Because if you're cool, if you've got like temperament that is damp or flat, as we talk about in holistic terms, then you need the fire to get you going. And some people naturally have that fire and they need a different element. So again, it goes back to knowing yourself well and deciding if something really is giving you a lot of difficulty, challenges, or heartache. It could be that it's just a phase, and it could be that you've grown and they've grown and you've moved to a new cycle, or it could be that someone's just growing in different ways. But you can always, and I was reading this today, actually, I was reading a book that I had on my Kindle for quite a long time, Intimacy and Desire. And one of the things that it talks about, the 4 corners of healthy functioning, is that somebody within that, both people in the relationship are owning their own space, they're owning their own emotions, they're owning their own psychology, and they meet and communicate, but they don't rely on the other to prop them up or make them feel good or give them a sense of self. And that, or they borrow, and a lot of people borrow somebody else's sense of self when they haven't got their own.
And they haven't got their own.
Where it gets very difficult, because in those close to relationships, the longer you are with something, he was talking about how we map people's brains and patterns, and the closer you are in that relationship with them, you don't always know who is you and who is them until you spend enough time apart. And that's why keep learning how to center yourself in the wheel for all aspects of your life. You'll start to become much better at discerning every experience that you have, every choice that comes up. You'll know whether or not that is something that you usually experience. You start to know whether it's your own trauma or your own trigger, and then you can take ownership and you can say, right, I'm going to sleep, or I'm going to eat, or I'm going to have some time out. I'm going to look after myself, because we owe it to other people to look after ourselves.
Yes, that's part of, like, that's our responsibility, to take care of ourselves. Funny, because I busted my toe against like an object, right? And I was like, oh, ow, because it hurt. Because, those are pretty intense, they come in pretty quick. But it was one of those that I felt anger rise up in me, kind of pain. And I was like, oh, and here comes my husband, are you okay? And I was like, all I could muster was, don't talk yet, anger. He was like, okay. And then he went to the touch. I was like, no touch, anger. It's
because you're aware of yourself.
Because before I would have been like, what the, and I would say shitty things that didn't really mean, and then it's like, sorry, but now I don't have to. And now I say, as they were walking, no, I needed my boundary. This is boundary.
This is what I need right now.
And then it to be reciprocated. Okay, I see this is a boundary. I can't take that offensively, right? This is that interdependence. I'm taking care of myself. Thank you for coming in just in case I did need help. I respect that, but you're also respecting me right now, because I'm saying no.
This is
it's really kind of cool. Now I do have a few questions that I'm going to pose for the listeners. And when you receive the Wheel of Fortune, or you're working inside of this energy, it's, what is the big picture? If we go back to what Mel said about the micro and macro, what can feel huge in your world may be insignificant in the bigger picture, right? Because again, the life goes up and down. The wheel's always turning. All right. What is my role in the big picture? So now we're thinking of the big picture. This is all expansive. If you're following it, this is an expansive card. We are working with Jupiter energies. We are expanding. So if I can now see the big picture, what is my role in the big picture? And what changes have occurred in life without my interference? It's going to surprise you when you answer that question honestly, how little you have to do for the good things to happen. What does anxiety and worry do? It takes time away from your now, right? It takes time away from blessings in the moment. And things have this really beautiful way of working themselves out. for your highest good, not for what you want, but what for you need. And there's a huge difference in those two. And what we might have wanted will change. What we need will not.
That's really trusting the universe, isn't it? And it can take time. And we've been talking about this outside of the podcast as well, haven't we? That if you're used to really doing and managing and parenting and protecting all of those things, being able to sit back and go, okay, I know there's a shift or it's a change or something that I'd like to expand or move on, but you don't quite know how.
Right.
Actually, what comes out of as well of all the things I listen to is you just decide that you would like something along those lines. You don't have to look at how in the level of detail, you just make a decision. And once you've made the decision, the possibilities, and that's with your children, with your career, whether it's a course that you're doing, a line of work that you want to do, or like we were talking earlier, both of us love exploring. You want to travel and expand around the world. I want to travel and expand around the UK, but we both love that feeling that it gives us and freedom within that. So you make a decision. I want to travel and I want to expand. How that looks, who knows? But that's the beauty, is when you can go, okay. And sometimes when I've had moments where I don't trust the universe, and that has happened a lot in the past. I've then looked back and thought, actually, I've been a single parent for over 20 years, like bringing up my boys. Well, the universe has had my back to this point. So work has come from somewhere, and it's even more precarious the last few years since I went self-employed. And the car, I managed to get the car fixed. I managed to keep things running and on the road. And it's been a bit hairy at times. So the universe must have my back. And that's then instilling that reality of not looking forward to what isn't going to happen, is have a look at where it's actually already been happening.
The third eye is all about the reality, not the reality you wish for, but the reality as it is. And so that's it. I've been a single mom of 3 myself, and somehow the bills got paid. Somehow there was always food on the table. Somehow I always had a running vehicle. Somehow the lights were always on. And somehow every year, even when I was a waitress, a server at a chain restaurant, I still managed to take my kids to the beach one time a year on one income. It's not like these people were throwing the money at me. No, that's locked up in the court system somewhere. Like, I'm having to do this work. But anytime I was in a crunch and I needed, the universe came in clutch every time, came and rescued whatever it was. I was never without. And it's because in those moments, without even realizing it, I was trusting the universe. Now that I'm conscious to it, I'm asking for a bigger, bolder picture. I'm asking for more and more, because now I'm recognizing that, oh, wow, maybe if I was doing this consciously, the universe clearly is a doting parent who wants to take care of us and wants to see us thrive and wants us to learn the lessons so that we can thrive. So let's trust in that guidance system. Let's trust in the guidance system that we wish we had as a children, that they're here, and this is how parenting actually looks like, is the universe. And it's teaching us these beautiful, grand lessons. And if I trust and have faith in those lessons, my life is going to change for the better in ways that I couldn't even imagine.
And there's a couple of things that I think a lot of people listen to this will resonate with, is if you don't believe you're worthy of anything, then no matter how much work you do, you're cutting off any of the blessings that are coming in your direction. And if you don't,
you're choosing the fated path.
And if you don't have the esteem, and the thing is, everybody that's been born is worthy of having a delicious, beautiful, abundant life.
Yes.
And the more that you, like the way that you were talking, it's the more you focus on the blissful moments that you have. And even if there's one a week, because you're coming out of depression and anxiety, you've got small children, you're running ragged from job to job. Even if it's looking at a flower on the way to work, seeing the sun come out and you love that, or you see the rain and you love that, start teaching yourself to focus on something that could become blissful moments, more than one moment, because the more you focus on the bliss, the more you notice children laughing, the more you feel gratitude for the gifts that people bestow on you at whatever time, is you start to magnify that energetic system within your own system and expand that. And that makes it more receptive. It's almost like saying to the universe, yeah, I can cope with more, bring more to me. Because we've talked, haven't we, of the magic moments that we get. I was sharing with you today, I'm out in my car, it's sunny, and I'm just, you know, I could be anywhere in the world driving down that road in that moment, because it's just a blissful experience. And I haven't gone anywhere to get it. It's just been repetitive work of going back into the center of the wheel, calming myself, deciding what I will and don't want to get caught up in, or things that you just think, actually, why did I spend so long staying in that situation that just made me feel awful every time, you know, I come out of it, or whatever the thinking process was. Is you can expand that. And one of the things we teach some of the women that come to our group on a Friday is there's a process within NLP where, you know, I can say, because you were getting into that moment when you were talking about it looked like, you know, and if you're imagining that you're generating this idea, so say you have an idea and you go, okay, so you tap into that idea of where you were feeling that blissful moment, and you say, has it got a color? So, you know, you give it, and I've been seeing sunflowers all week, so I'll give it a sunflower shade.
It's been very yellow the last week.
Very
it's
yellow.
been yellow in color. So yellow. So think anything yellow. And that's the beauty of the spring that we're coming into is, you know, the sun's out longer, the everything's colorizing, you're bringing everything into life. What does that bring you? Typically joy. You know, or find another word that represents the color yellow for you. And that is kind of the overall theme I've been really noting. And although we're going through a lot of hard things, a lot of people are on a very large level, we are still finding this beauty in the day-to-day, in the blooming, in the longer, you know, the warmer weather, the less cold. It's just things that, you know, if we focus on, then those will bring that color for you and that NLP that you're talking about.
And the reason I'm really sort of emphasizing things so much now is because I'm starting to see the impact that coming out of lockdown has had on a lot of people, where they might have managed to sustain things for a while, but the problem with prolonged stress is it really taxes the nervous system. And so if people are applying any techniques in which to relax the nervous system, and they're now getting more and more fearful about other things that are going on, it's even more imperative for their own sense of well-being, because it'll either come through as some kind of illness, diabetes, heart problems, you know, aches and pains, or it'll be some psychological difficulties or struggle at work or whatever that is. So we're talking about ramping things up to the point that you spend time, whether you're in the bath or laying on the sofa or sat in the garden, ramping up your idea of that. Immerse yourself in the imagery, immerse yourself in any memory that felt good at the time when you were experiencing it. Give it a color, give it a shape. Imagine that it's even like the old-fashioned TVs, you know, you had a dial on the TV. Do you remember them? And that dial is, you could turn the contrast up, couldn't you? You had a contrast dial and you had a volume, and you can turn the dial up and you can make it really bright. And that's what they do in LNP. You got this little picture and you make it brighter and brighter and brighter.
Bigger,
saturate it completely. And imagine that the saturation is going into your whole system, and you milk it. And Abraham Hicks is always talking about any good experience you get, you milk it, you milk it, you milk it. Every joyous experience you get, you milk it, because you deserve it. There's a right, you've got a right to have been born. You deserve to have good things in your life, but you deserve to be at the center of feeling peace, joy, and satisfaction.
Well,
and not all the other stuff.
Well, what you're talking about really is this, you know, reprogramming, right, of the neural pathways, you know, feeling the good, allowing that space to come in until it becomes normal. And that takes me to what I do, and I teach, which is, you know, I use numbers a lot, you know, so 33. So 33, if you look, maybe I can't remember if it's in the Gene Keys, but in human design, it's all kind of like, it's a number that we'll see on the clock. It's a number we'll see on a tag. It's a common number, right? 33. So for me, it was, what is my storyline? What is my storyline? And so do I want the story to be of hardship and sadness and fear and anger? Do I want a different storyline that involves more peace and joy and experiences that make me happy? And so rewiring your brain can look as that simple. It really can. It can be, what is my story? And allow yourself to drop back, just like Mel said, into that moment, into the moment of bliss, to the moment you've created, and say, ah, that's my story. This is the story of peace, the story of kindness, the story of compassion, whatever your words are for that, allow that to be your story. So there's all these different ways that we can bring this information to us. But the first step really is you have to get out of the game. You have to walk into the center, and you have to learn how to center. And then you can expand upon that. And the rest of these cards really will show us the way you expand upon this until you hit the end of the cycle. Now, we are coming up on time, so I was going to go ahead and give out the tarot spread if we're ready for that. Okay, perfect. So I tried really hard to keep this one short, but it didn't. It's a 6-card spread. Sorry. Right. All right. So the first card you're going to pull is for yourself. What is the current state of self? The second card you're going to pull is for the environment, state of the world around me and how it's affecting me. The third card is, what do I need a break from? The fourth card is, what in my life is gaining momentum? The fifth card is, what in my life is in full bloom? And the sixth and final card is, what in my life is leaving / dying, removing itself from my existence? From it, that.
One of the things around, say, NLP, so neuro-linguistic program, is if you're focused on what have you seeded, what are you nurturing, what is going into full bloom, is even if things are dying, falling away, they just won't have the impact, because the energy within all the other stuff, you may notice it, you may feel it, you may feel a bit, slight sadness. But neurologically, the more that you're focusing on this, is you are creating those neural pathways or firing up the different neurons in the system. And that's what's fascinating, is the tarot can provide the keys to open the door to that process, to do that kind.
Yeah. So this is where we talk the layman's talk. This is, I know what studying I've done. I know what you've done. But now what about those who haven't had this proclivity for psychology, right? This opens the door for people that don't know anything about psychology, but they're ready to move forward and heal. Things like these simple basics really can open the door for a massive amount of healing and growing in your world without needing to know everything there is to need to know about psychology, psychiatry. And if you are not able to, say, get the therapist or the therapy, this is a really good way in the door for yourself to start this healing process, to getting through the hard stuff, to understanding who you are and the psychology of you. And that's why really Mel and I are providing these lessons through the tarot, is because I can sit here and spill all of the big words. I can sit here and give you definitions to them, but unless you understand it fully, you're not going to be able to take the lesson. And the more I've dug into this, the more I've realized time and again that this is a journey that you and yourself can take alone. And all we can do is provide the information and the keys to maybe allowing you to see a new way of doing it. So this is yet just another form of psychology to me, another form of bridging the gap between our understanding of ourselves and the understanding of psychology, the understanding of psychology through spirituality. This is just a bridge to get us there. We're all on the same journey. How you take that journey is up to you. It ends up in the same place. So you just keep taking the journey in whatever way fits you. The Major Arcana is a really good way to get your foot in the door to understanding the depths of who you are and the world
Mm.
around you, and be able to take forward motion without feeling like you're a victim to circumstances or feeling like the world is out to get you, and start taking some of that power back and start taking some of that acknowledgement of self back. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think my note, which might surprise a lot of people, I think taking the journey alone, reading up, to developing your own intuition, developing an understanding and a true experience of peace, whatever class you take, you don't have to go to therapy to keep talking about what your story was, because sometimes you just get stuck in the same storyline. What you've got to, it's a good blend of positive psychology, mindfulness, spirituality. It's a blend of all those different things. And if that means you spend 2 months on something and move on to something else, it's just your soul growing. It's just saying, I'm expanding. I just want to take on some new ideas.
Yeah. And there's so many available. So this is just one of many, and we'll be talking about others after the series is done. But this is one that really did a lot of work for myself. It's very important to me because I took the journey through. I started with tarot, and what started out as something just getting through, I began to realize as I started doing it, there's so much depth to it. And this depth, I don't know, is being acknowledged in the fields of study that it should be, but it is happening. And so why not take a hold of it and say, hey, by the way, I learned something really cool here. Maybe if you took this route, you could learn something too. And so that's really what we're trying to do.
Well, that's brilliant. And I look forward to when we do the next card in the journey that the Fool takes through the tarot. So thank you, Danielle, for tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.